Jamie, thank you. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today for this interview. It's great to have you here.
Great to be
Um,
with you. Looking forward to it.
so for those who don't know, Jamie is an incredibly successful student, entrepreneur, and now author. He studied at Harvard, Stanford, Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, Yale, UPenn, Auckland, and Tsinghua, amongst others, and was in the Forbes 30 under 30 and has co-founded and is the CEO of Crimson Education. He can now add successful authorship to his long list of achievements now. Jamie, did I miss anything there?
Very kind, very kind.
Yep. Starting us off with the age-old question, I was wondering if you could please describe yourself if you were to describe yourself in 5 words, what would they be?
Obsessed with education, theme park lunatic. So I love theme parks and I love education. Would be two quick summaries.
So, what inspired you to take those kind of routes to it, like the pathway? So, Crimson.
Oh yeah, sure. So I grew up in New Zealand, and in New Zealand, most students stay within New Zealand for university. Some go to Australia if they're feeling audacious. And I was at a school that was one of the strongest schools in New Zealand, but still had a culture of kind of staying locally for the most part. But when I was 14, I was in the train and I sat next to a boy called Ben Kornfeld who got into Yale University. And he inspired me to really think about what could happen if I go study overseas. So I made it my mission for the next 4 years to really push myself to build a really strong US profile. And then I ended up applying to schools like, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, Wharton, got into those schools. And then I had a lot of peers that I went through high school with that were very talented, but applied and didn't get any offers from these top universities. And I thought there was a real opportunity to help guide the next generation of Kiwis to kind of follow in my journey to go to these top universities and unlock some opportunity. So that triggered the desire to kind of launch Crimson. As I've built Crimson, I've continued to be a student, I guess a lifelong learner, you could say, really trying to be a good role model for my students and also continue to build my academic knowledge as well.
That's amazing because Crimson Server, it's grown so fast over these past few years, and it's kind of inspired so many like students to reach their full academic potential. So it's very just inspiring to see.
We love it, absolutely. And I do think that education is such a powerful transformative force in someone's life. Like there are a few things in life where you plug a student into a top university and it just dramatically changes what they can achieve going forward. So I do feel like we're really lucky to be in this juncture in a student's life between high school and college and unlocking those opportunities for them. And also, I particularly love helping international students who, for them, this represents the opportunity to not only get a better education, but potentially, even enter into a brand new job market and unlock, new generational opportunities for their family.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from your book is that education is the best way to establish your own legacy. That was very insightful for me.
Love it, love it. Well, I totally agree, naturally, and I think, yeah, it's just a brilliant way to open up a whole new set of opportunities. And I think, of course, you can achieve anything from anywhere. And Sir John Key was the kindly offered a forward in the book and wrote about his own educational experience and how he went from a great New Zealand university to being the prime minister and working on Wall Street and stuff. But I think you stack the odds dramatically in your favor if you can push hard on education early in your life.
Yeah. So along that same route, I was wondering, in your opinion, how much has the university application kind of process changed now compared to what it was when you were applying, and how do you see it changing in the future?
So I think the core foundations are still largely the same. Students need to focus on academics, extracurriculars, leadership, essays, and interviews, at least for the US process. I think the changes that have taken place in the last decade, admissions rates have halved or more at many of the schools as more and more kids are applying both to more universities and also there's more awareness in terms of students across Australia, New Zealand, all over the globe about these opportunities. So that competitiveness raises the bar, with each progressive year as far as what you need to do to get in. There are also other trends, like for example, the SAT, which used to be compulsory, is now theoretically optional. Although for many top students, you still want to take it. And then, there's also new dynamics where race or your ethnicity can no longer be considered based on the Supreme Court verdict, which means that, previously, particularly Asian American students or white American students had some degree of disadvantage in that, certain students from Hispanic or African American backgrounds might have had higher admissions rates conditional on their academic grades. And the removal of that, changes up probably the demographics going forward of the set of students in the schools. And that's a very challenging issue. So I'd say that's some of the major changes, but I think the overarching trend is the schools keep getting more popular, and also the opportunities, if you can get in, keep getting bigger.
Yeah, that's great. So, how did you find what you were passionate about when you were in high school and like kind of what you wanted to study in the future? Were there any key catalysts that influenced your decision?
Definitely. So I think for the early parts of high school, I had this belief that I should do medicine for probably some bad reasons, that it was an academically rigorous field. I liked the sciences, but I didn't really have a clear sense of what life as a doctor would be like. But I felt like it was sort of a good thing to do. But when I took an economics class when I was about 16, that was when I had a real eureka moment, because I always loved math, and economics provides a very powerful way to explain why the way the world is. I think the free market's a very powerful force in incentivizing entrepreneurship and innovation. And when I came across economics, it was like coming across this all-powerful force that could explain a lot of why society is, and also it unlocked careers in things like finance and also entrepreneurship. So I think once I took economics, I just fell in love with the field, and I continue to love other domains like sciences or English or law and stuff. But I think my main true academic love is probably economics and finance. And once I had that interest, when I got to Harvard, I focused heavily on applied math and economics. I took a lot of pretty rigorous economics classes, and continued to love that field. So I think that's kind of what catalyzed my interest. I also read a couple of books that triggered that curiosity, from books like What They Teach You at Harvard Business School to Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo, talking about how a lot of aid grants to Africa have been pretty ineffective historically, as well as books like Freakonomics, which I think is a great demonstration of the power of microeconomics to help explain bizarre trends in the world that don't seem initially obvious.
Economics is a wonderful field, and yeah, like your journey, I started mine when I was like my age as well, when I took an economics class, and kind of learning about how the world functions and how people interact with things that they find valuable has been like really, really insightful and interesting.
Amazing. And I couldn't agree more. And I think, building on that, if you think about the free market and economics for a second, there are a lot of people that are really concerned about climate change, right? Which is very valid. But think about how, the free market forces start moving, and then, Tesla manages to get birthed into existence, and there's investors willing to back Elon Musk. There's a big innovator, Elon Musk, willing to work hard, 100 hours a week to make this thing come to life. Engineers can get stock options in this company, which then rewards them for value creation. And the result of all this, free market mechanisms and moving is that you get this radical electric vehicle that can then, and then the presence of this electric vehicle can then catalyze, competition from, Nissan and Audi and all these other companies to pile in. And that triggers this kind of electric vehicle revolution, which then these policymakers kind of get behind. But it is amazing to see how the free market forces incentivize this, like, ultimately very productive behavior for society. And I think understanding the relationship between incentives and free market forces, and then some of these outputs is quite fascinating. And of course, the economy has many drawbacks, limitations. It doesn't always work well, but on the whole, it's kind of an incredible force for good.
And good old supply and demand.
Love it. Yep.
So yeah, first of all, congratulations on your book accepted. So my favorite thing about the book is that it really like cuts through the clutter. You don't fill the book with complicated words. You simply just tell the hard facts of admissions that would have previously seemed like really daunting for students. So I'm interested to ask, what inspired you to write your book accepted? And was the experience what you were expecting, or were there any challenges that you found? And how did you find the time for authorship between juggling your degrees and managing Crimson?
Great question. So I think the funny thing about publishing a book is that when you're an entrepreneur, you've got to raise capital from investors. And when you're a prospective author, you need to find like a book publisher and an agent. And you would think that potentially it's easier to publish a book than raising venture capital money, because it should seem like it's harder to raise a lot of capital. But what I found is that actually, investors are very proactive with taking meetings and wanting to find potential companies to invest in. whether the world of getting published and getting agents and stuff is actually a bit more unstructured, ambiguous, and chaotic. So actually, I was very lucky that I had some, great mentors in the Crimson Network, like Kim Scott, who previously had been a published author many times over, who was able to help shepherd me through this complicated world. But I think the initial thing is the actual publishing process is probably a bit more complicated to unlock than it first seems. I think once you figure it out, it's a lot more obvious and straightforward. But the beginning part is a bit challenging. As far as but yeah, I was very happy in the end though. And really loved our publisher, which was great. Now, as far as what inspired me to write the book, it'd been nearly a decade of college admissions. I supported thousands of kids in their application process, and I felt like there was a lot of things that were not intuitive, not obvious, that I would often tell students, and I figured that broadly disseminating that information would be a powerful resource for many kids that might not necessarily be Crimson students, but it could get a flavor for some of the magic that drives our results. And also for my Crimson students, before they begin working with us, they can read this as an initial primer to kind of get some initial insight so that when they begin the journey with me and with the team, we can quickly move to more advanced strategy and they have some of the basic concepts down. So I think that's some of the reasons why I wanted to do the book. And then I did it actually during COVID. I did a lot of it while I was sitting in Sydney. And so it was, a great time to do these productive projects. And I had some ferocious weekends bashing out chapters, which was a lot of fun.
That's great. Accepted was really interesting because, like you said, it compiles like many years of your own experience as well as like lessons that you learned into this one volume. So it's like really insightful for both Crimson and out of Crimson students as well. So something I found particularly interesting in your book is that you mentioned the idea of the tall poppy syndrome. Could you give us a bit like of a description about what that is and if it's affected your own high school journey as a student aiming to top universities?
Yeah, sure. So in New Zealand in particular, there's this idea of the tall poppy syndrome. And what this refers to is that if you're average and you fit in and you don't disrupt the herd, all is good. But as soon as you pop up and you become this tall poppy, which is potentially ironic as I'm very short, then people will try and, pull you down back to average. If you express interest in going down a different path, it could be entrepreneurship, it could be studying overseas, it could be really doing anything just a bit different. Maybe what you wear is a bit different or something like that. That alone, can drive peers to kind of try and pull you back. And there's different reasons for this, and different cultures all have this phenomena, but some in more extreme ways. And I did feel like in New Zealand, like there's a one side of the coin is we have this egalitarian culture where everybody basically, is valued equally, and everyone can live fairly harmoniously. That's like the good sides of the culture. But the bad side is this kind of anti-ambition tall poppy syndrome that a lot of students do feel. And I think that I definitely felt that in many ways throughout my education journey. But fortunately, of course, you can just ignore it and just get over it and keep pushing hard. But there are a lot of subtle subconscious ways in which it can drag back your ambition and undermine your sense of purpose, and also veer you off potentially less conventional paths. So I did feel like a lot of what I experienced and also what I inspire my Crimson students is to make sure that students recognize that their ambition is one of the most powerful things about them, and they shouldn't be afraid of it. They shouldn't hide these goals. And there are actually many other ambitious students just like them around the world, and they just need to find them. And so hopefully through Crimson, we help to catalyze a huge number of students to, ignore tall poppy syndrome and be relentlessly focused on their big goals for the world stage.
Yeah, especially for Crimson, I think it's really like very apparent of that goal because like you said in your book, you judge Crimson students, you put them into classes based on their ability, not their age. So there's not really a barrier to how much ambition that they can have as compared to how much they are willing to take on, which is amazing.
Yeah, very well said. And that's a really good summary of part of the thinking, which is that in high school, there's a lot of arbitrary pushing of students to just sit in classes based on age. And when you enable students to just go through and take whatever credentials they want at the speed they want, you can unlock their, creativity and ambition. Suddenly, a kid who's very good at math could finish the high school math sequence, very early, or you could take classes in things like law that you wouldn't normally be able to fit into your schedule. And so I think, liberalizing the, class selection process and letting you, go at your own speed makes the process a lot more engaging than sort of, artificially slowing you down, which I think is a disaster.
Yeah, very more it's much more intellectually stimulating that way.
Totally, totally. Yeah, couldn't agree
So
more.
yeah, in chapter 17 you included a very viral question about understanding the personality of US universities, which goes something like how many blank students does it take to change a light bulb? Along those same lines, I'm interested to ask, in your opinion, how many Crimson or CGA students does it take to change a light bulb and why?
Well, naturally, our Crimson students are well trained, so I'm sure one student can change the light bulb very, very quickly and efficiently with good strategy as well. They will buy the right light bulb, the right price. They'll know how to install it, and it will shine very brightly.
What would you say about the same question for the CGA staff? Would it be the same answer?
CJ staff, yes, and they can even install a light bulb across the country by getting their students from all over the world to help with them on the project.
Yeah. So, I'm interested to know, what are your thoughts on the impact of the book, both in enriching the educational journey of students around the world, as well as its impact in scaling the company?
So I think it's great because ultimately there are millions of kids interested in the process to go abroad, and some feel it so intimidating they don't even start, or they have these anxieties around what it could entail. So I think the book's purpose is really to make the process more accessible to more students and to also elevate the odds of getting into more competitive schools. So I think it's doing both of those things. I get a lot of students reaching out, saying that they use the book to get into top universities, or it catalyzed their journey to come jump into Crimson, or they use some of the strategies that they wouldn't have thought of. So I think that was some of the logic of releasing it, and hopefully it's having an impact.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely has. It's very like clear and concise, and it's by far one of like the best academic like university study books I've ever read. So, I found it quite inspiring that you founded Crimson when you were 17 with your then girlfriend. Could you give us an insight on kind of like the founding story of Crimson?
Yeah, sure. So I just got into all of these different universities, and it was the 7 months before Harvard began, because if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you get these offers, and then school finishes in December, and you don't go over to the kind of like the following September or around August, September. So I had this time, and I had a lot of students reaching out to me from my high school and other high schools, asking how I'd gotten into all these schools and any tips I had for them. So what that naturally led to was I thought about, okay, well, I help these kids myself, but also how can I solve this in a more scalable way? And then I began recruiting the three other kids that got into Harvard that year from New Zealand. And I remember, Prasad, Matir, and Joel were our very first consultants. And then, Chandra and I ran around recruiting different tutors and other mentors that could help these students. And that became really the early days of Crimson, helping a small handful of kids from Auckland into the world's best universities. So that was kind of how things began. And it was very much about taking my personal experience in the admissions process, Chandra's experience, particularly in the leadership process, because she was the head girl of her high school and a very talented student leader, and helping these kids unlock their full potential. So it was a lot of hands-on student to student work in Auckland, sometimes in people's houses, sometimes online. And that served as the foundation that got us going. And then initially, my plan was not necessarily to do this at a global scale. But what I found quite quickly is that students were finding this very useful. And there was students from all kinds of different backgrounds, from the Chinese community, Korean community, Americans that happen to live in New Zealand, engaging with our program. And that meant there was probably a global audience that we could unlock. So that really inspired me to then think more globally. And then I began raising capital from investors, which enabled me to achieve those goals of global expansion faster. And that was really how the early story of Crimson began. Really, it's a story of a love of education, a love of ambition, and a strong belief that these international universities can be transformative.
Right. Would you say that so Crimson kind of started off like a really intensive tutoring business and then you scaled it to the like global company that it is today?
Yeah, I would say our early foundations were still probably in college guidance. We did do a lot of tutoring as well, but I would say for sure it started off with a handful of talented teachers guiding students in Auckland, and then it snowballed to more countries, more services, starting younger. We began acquiring other units, and it's morphed into this global education platform. And I still think it's early days. There's great potential ahead, and we see more and more students really excited by our philosophy and our approach.
So how did the challenges that you faced change over time for Crimson? How did you see them changing in the future as well?
So I think when I started Crimson, we had a handful of folks. Today we have more than 700 full-time staff and thousands of mentors, and it's across 20 countries. So the first challenge is that I wasn't even a particularly strong leader in high school. I definitely did some leadership roles, started some clubs, but as you scale an organization, you have hundreds of people, potentially thousands, tens of thousands that look to you for inspiration and guidance. And so I've definitely had to level up my people leadership skills over time, and it's still a imperfect, flawed, continuously growing process. But I think in entrepreneurship, either you level up faster than your company needs and you stay relevant, or you don't, and someone else, maybe is better at your role than you are. And it's always been my focus to kind of try and acknowledge where I need to go next and keep that personal growth happening. So I think from a growth perspective, that has been really important to make sure that I can keep being a good leader for the business. And then secondly, I think as far as other challenges, probably today, college admissions is getting more and more competitive. And so we always have to keep innovating in terms of ways we can help our students continue to develop their profile. So when we began Crimson, we did college admissions. Now kids can do, online internships or work experience programs with amazing companies. They can do research papers from anywhere. They can do extra APs or A levels. They can go on these immersive tours. They can meet other Crimson kids around the world. All these different things designed to help you build this world-class profile in response to this ever-changing and more competitive college admissions landscape.
Yeah. So would you say that the growth of Crimson as a company also forces you to grow as a individual as well?
Definitely. It's a very serendipitous cycle. And I definitely feel that as leaders, not just myself, but our leadership team, many of our country managers, there's a need to keep leveling up. And actually, one of our company values is level up, really speaking to this idea of continuous personal growth.
Yeah. So in relation to CGA, how would you say that this company aligns with your vision of Crimson towards educational enrichment?
So there's a huge variance in school quality around the world. And I work with students from schools in New York to Singapore to Korea to rural New Zealand. And there's just huge variance in schooling ability. And a lot of the time, a school will try and pretend it's great, and every teacher will, say they're wonderful, and the principals will believe they're like the best things in sliced bread. But there is huge variance in school quality around the world. And so my aspiration in launching Crimson Global Academy was to build the world's first truly global online high school where kids from anywhere can access great teachers, awesome credentials, and really the tools they need to get out there on the world stage. So it was really about bringing down the cost of access to a world-class private school experience and providing a credible alternative to, potentially not so strong local schools, or even supplementing strong schools like the one, you're going to using CGA alongside your physical high school. So that was really the vision for CGA. And I saw that, while there were some online high schools in America, globally, there wasn't really any of note. And there was a good opportunity to use many of Crimson's core capabilities to build this really powerful school platform for students to take advantage of their academic ambitions.
For CGA, I particularly like how it's so accessible. So I can get teachers from literally anywhere in the world, and they are all world class, such good teachers, and as well as the interactiveness and how you can just sit in front of a laptop and then get access to this kind of opportunity. It's really just amazing.
Love it. Love to hear it. That's what keeps us going. So I'm super excited that it's working for you.
So as someone who is incredibly inspired by you, I'm interested to ask, what does a typical workday look like for you?
That's a great question. So a typical workday for me often involves a lot of different calls with various folks from my executive team, some of our country managers. Maybe I'm meeting someone for a company we might acquire or invest in. I might have a call with an investor or one of our advisors where I'm asking a certain question about our potential product growth or development, or how we take some new academic offering to the next level. I might spend some time on some of my student mentoring calls. Today, for example, after this, I've got 3 or 4 calls with my students around the world. And then I might spend some time doing a bit of academics for a program that I'm studying potentially. This morning I was taking a math program here at Princeton where I'm on campus at the moment. And then I might have some gaps where I do some work thinking about our strategy around where we're heading to next, or whether we should or shouldn't embark on some new type of product. That will kind of give you a bit of a flavor for a typical day. Then I might mix that in with maybe a movie, maybe a bit of tennis, maybe a run, or who knows, a fun YouTube streamer I like to follow. I also play this game called Warhammer, which is a bit of a strategy board game. So that would be probably a typical day for me during the week.
That sounds extremely intensive. So alongside balancing your academics, Crimson, Warhammer, tennis, running, and your courses, how do you find the time?
Well, I have a really strong team around me, and I think I've found that whether it be a student in high school, using tutors to help optimize your study schedule and efficiency, or in my case, I've got an amazing assistant, Dana, that helps me with scheduling and managing my time and everything, which makes me a lot more productive. All the way to being very intentional with how long I need to spend on different types of things, and how best to pursue something. So I try and avoid useless meetings, and I try and make sure that when I'm in one-on-ones with my team, it's very focused and productive. And I think whatever I'm doing, I try to be really always on, high intensity, get it done quickly and efficiently, and then move to the next challenge. And then I make sure I always get great sleep, because I think if you don't sleep well, it creates this sort of domino effect of a lack of efficacy during the day. And then finally, I just make sure that everything I do, for the most part, I love. You can't do everything. Can't, like, sometimes you have a challenging call or a dice situation or some circumstance you've got to deal with. But for the most part, if you love what you're doing, it gives you unlimited energy, and I think that keeps you fresh and vibrant. And then I think just keeping an eye on your broad energy levels and pacing. But I think for the most part, entrepreneurship and education for me is very addictive, and I love it.
Definitely. So would you say that kind of running a successful company is more than just yourself? It's also very dependent on like those around you as well.
Absolutely. So I would say entrepreneurship at this point is really about the Crimson community. It's about the team, the world-class team of teachers, tutors, educators we have around the place. Crimson's morphed into far more than I initially could have imagined. And that team, that community, the aligned values, they really are what makes it special and continue to deliver great results for our students. So I think as you do entrepreneurship, initially you might have an idea, but eventually what you really have to do is, create a world-class team that's motivated to go after, the big vision that exists and solve some meaningful problems collectively. And I think, companies really succeed or fail based on the ability to mobilize really a movement behind that vision. Totally agree. It's very based on the team.
So for my final question, I would like to ask if you had one piece of advice to give to a 15-year-old student who wants to go to the best universities in the world, what would that be?
Great question. I would say my number one piece of advice is to really turbocharge the academics. What I mean by that is, first of all, ensure you're getting excellent grades in all your high school credentials, but then amplify that with potentially some university courses, maybe some extra A levels, and really set the bar very high. Because although there's extracurriculars or there's leadership, the academics is just the essential core pillar that has to be really your obsessive focus. So smashing the academics is going to get you into some good schools, but also it's going to mean that when you get there, you're going to thrive, and you're going to have that fantastic training that will help you be really effective in your career, in your university degree and beyond. So I think, crush the academics, take them very seriously. Number one essential goal, nail the basics.
Absolutely insightful. So that's it for my questions today. Thank you so much for joining me for this interview.
Thank you, Eric. It was a blast.
All right.
We're
Thank
really
you.
honored to have you in our community.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Beautiful. You too, mate. Thanks, Eric. See ya. Cheers.